Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. So our speaker needs no introduction, but Dr. Gamage is a policy analyst focusing on education. Her latest publication looks at teacher factors in integrating ICT in education. And she's currently a senior research fellow at LearnAsia and a co-founder of the Education Forum Sri Lanka. So Dr. Gamage.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Advocata, and thank you all for coming here on this raining day. And when Dean first asked me to talk on education topics some months back, I actually had about 10 topics to choose from because we had just rejuvenated what we call the Education Forum Sri Lanka, which actually has been there for a while. This website has been there for 2005, and Tara Dimel and we got talking, and we thought we would revitalize that. Then my other co-conspirator is Nisha Arnatilak of IPS. We managed to pull her in, and we talked to a lot of people, just got some ideas, and we came up with these burning issues, and we thought we are going to do this. Um, Actually, there's 11 policy briefs. And at that time, it seemed like there is the need for that. Because it's about 6 months ago, the government is, at the end of its sort of playing around literally. And education, I felt they had done a lot of work, but it was as if they were ticking off items. Okay, let's do this, 13 years, tabs, tabs, of course, they could not tick off, but, and there was no overall vision, there was no soul, there was no sort of warm message that's coming through that. And we felt there was a need for some sort of a vision goals document, and that was then, and then I told Dean, no, let's think of something after the elections. Because, elections have a way of just changing the landscape. You might scrape through with just a slim majority, but it changes the landscape. And I'm glad we did, because this confidence is really not there anymore. Because, in policy you don't just do something in the privacy of your home and then turn out something like, say, Harry Potter. It's something policy has to be relevant, has to be related. So that's why I came up with this topic, campaign promises, because that's campaign promises, they don't get implemented, necessarily, not all of them. And what gets implemented is sometimes not in the manifestos. For example, the Constitution 1978, it's not in a manifesto. So, but still, that's a solid document we have. I actually did not pay much attention to that manifestos before this, preparing for this talk, because I thought it's usual, what's that called, auction of non-existent resources. But since this talk, given the topic, I thought about it, and then I used the word meaningful. Then I have to define what's meaningful. What's meaningful for me may not be meaningful for somebody. I need to come up with some generic criteria. What makes a policy meaningful? So that's what I'm going to first talk about. Attributes of a meaningful education policy. I thought, I picked up some of the tools I learned in public policy. Actually, public policy is a second career for me. I'm a scientist. Late in life, I went back to school and sat with pimple youth listening to taking political science 101 at Ohio State University, because I never done any, since 12 years old or something, I never done anything but science and math and language. So, but this is using the public policy tools and what I call kernels of theory, little bits of theory. First one, a good policy is part and parcel of the ongoing socio-political reforms. You can't get out of that. You will say, I know, the whole situation has changed. I don't know, I want to get out of the country. I don't like it. No, if you want to engage with policy, you have to deal with the ongoing socio-political reform. It's not the only way. If you don't want to engage, as Lindquist said in 2001, there are two other ways: direct policy impact, or you can work to broaden policy horizons. You can just keep on talking even if you don't get any impact. Another one is capacity building. I'll talk more about that, but because with the Education Forum, we intend to do all three. Then the second one is a good policy should be cohesive and robust. Because you find there's a lot of times policy making is by bullet points. You get a bunch of people together, you serve chocolate cake and Chinese rolls, and then you collect the bullet points, and then the policy comes about. Actually, I have direct evidence of that when the president banned the polythene and said, "Vidvat Kamitwaka Upadeshanuva." I get a RTI to Central Environment Authority, and I got the document to find. Actually, the appendix says. It's just a bunch of guys sitting around and saying, let's put this tax on, let's do this on, and it's a bunch of bullet points. And two appendices, actually there's one from ITI which says biodegradable plastic should not be used. There are two papers, they just totally ignore those. So it has to be any good policy you find, there's a good white paper or policy document behind it, and it's cohesive. I'll talk a little more, I'll give another example. Robust is, you take something out of the policy and it should not fall apart. You put something new, it should not fall apart. So that is very important. So if there's a policy, then to get this quality, it needs to have some substantive document behind it. Then the thing is balances equity, efficiency, and effectiveness. This is what I call the 3 E's. You can't go wrong if you apply these 3 E's to anything. I'll give an example. When the government first came in, giving tabs was a big idea, and we had done some research on ICT in education, so the secretary invited us to help them with that. And so we get this starting document. It's all about procurement. So I asked, what's the objective of this? Really, they haven't thought about it, because in any public policy intervention, you are looking at outcomes. Future outcomes. How do you know them? They are your present objectives. So they had no objective. So we talked about objectives. Digital literacy may be objective, giving them access to texts, because actually for A-levels, believe it or not, there are no textbooks. That's why the tuition masters have a heyday. So so effectiveness, if they don't think about effectiveness, you have to begin with the end in mind, outcome. And I learned another thing about equity at that particular meeting. We had only one meeting. We were talking too much about outcomes. We actually spent quite a bit of time in a policy brief, and we were not called for the meetings after that. And we know what happened to the TABS issue. They go with the procurement issue. I mean, there should have been a pilot. We proposed it was for a pilot. It was never done. Every year you hear they go to the president and they say, do a pilot and come back. It was never done. It was never implemented. So, and equity, I learned an interesting thing about the concept of equity as it is, held by government servants in this country. I suggested that, we have 9 provinces. Let's do the pilot. Let's give them our objectives and tell them to come up with, give them, do the pilots and tell us how to do it. He said, no, we can't do that. It's not sadharana. You have to give the same tablets to everybody. I said, this is a pilot. No. It's equitable, is giving the same bad thing or whatever to everybody equally. So equity, again, is something we need to always evaluate. What seems like equity on the surface, it's not equity. So these 3 criteria, I think, is something we should look at. Whatever the new policies, we need to look at them. Then this is specific. All 3 are actually is for any policy. Any good policy should have those. But this is specific to education. Don't stress out the families. I'll tell you about in 1970, very good policies, but they just stressed out the families too much, because fixing education is like fixing something at mid-sea, fixing a ship at mid-sea. Parents, you have a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old, you don't want to listen to, you don't hear about big changes. You want things to stay the same. So this is a very important one. Don't stress out the families too much. So, but another thing about policies is, you shouldn't forget the politics, because politics is not a bad word in policy. So I always start with this. This is my favorite. I'm not going to talk about it. I always put the key periods and when were the elections. You can really follow the policies by the elections. This is my sort of a template I use. And who were the secretaries at that time. You can't do policy research without just first addressing the politics. But I'm not going to go through that, but I'm going to use this backdrop when I talk about. So let's look at some education policies before we come to the present campaign policies of campaign promises of the present government. Um, what I want to show you here is that meaningful policies are backed by white papers and they're not developed by people, some very lily white, clean intellectuals with no politics. You have to be, you have to be have people who are interacting with or in the policy, in the political sphere. 19, this is the sessional paper 24, 1943, Kannanga report. Amazing document, I think perhaps the best document ever on education. I have a dog-eared copy. It's inherited from my father-in-law, E.P. Samarjeeva, and I treasure that. And I actually got it transcribed, and I'm going to put it up on educationforum.lk. It's an amazing document, and the discussion there, I think, is important. This committee, they wanted to have a independent commission. Actually, they wanted foreign experts, and they wanted, this is a state council, this is before the parliament. And but the committee argued, no, we need politicians. The executive committees, they are members of the state council, they are in the this executive committee system. No, we need the politicians, we need the experts, that is all the departments, all the inside education experts, and we need outside experts. And that's exactly what they did. So it was not it was done by it's like sectoral committee in parliament, but ours is not, they did their own research, they produced their own publication. And it really had an impact. I'm not going to talk more about it, but education ordinance, of course, came before this one, and it made a paradigm change in education. And I think good reason is that the policy intellectuals, actually the policy intellectuals were politicians. Politicians were policy intellectuals. I love that text, book, it's beautifully written, and I think probably Dr. Kannanga wrote that. And the other people in there were G.P. Mallasekara, P.D.S. Gururatna, amazing. I guess that's perhaps the only time in Sri Lanka we had that level of intellect behind the education program. We are never going to, as you can see, it's been going down here. And the next one, I'm not going to go through the other ones. Schools takeover was just nothing in it. 1960, I think, 65, Sidima Bandana government. As soon as they came to power, schools were taken over. And there are big changes in activist secretary we had in 1970-77 period. I have not been able to find any policy very good white papers. And those reforms were actually, I think, it failed, I think, because there was no substantive, evidence and analysis behind it. White paper 1981. This was young Mr. Ranil Wickramasinghe. I think it's really heyday of his career. It's a wonderful work he did from 80 to 89. He was an education minister. And this white paper was, I think, ahead of his time. They had to pull it back because the people are really using it as a protest against the government. They proposed cluster schools, but the original idea was same education in the Kannangara proposals, uniformity. This talked about cluster schools and each cluster being given more independence. But then, this was seen as a way of differentiated education, but it was just trashed on the streets. But very interesting, I was reading Mr. Wickramasinghe's biography, and it says JR had told him, forget the white paper, do the things anyway. Very interesting. Maybe it was the beginning of Ranil Wickramasinghe's, approach to politics. But at that time, the youth services came before, not as education minister, National Education Commission, National Institute of Education, colleges of education, school development board act, so much work happened during that time. Maybe they are not working today, but at least we have some very good infrastructure and we know why some things work and why some things don't. Then I think in 1997, 1994, Chandrika comes to power, and she was actually quite really, truly interested in education. In 1997, actually, 1992, I had said National Education Commission, this first report, it's a very interesting one. They came up with what's called basic competencies for education. So at that time, this is time when all over the world people are saying, what should children really learn? There was a really good, and they want to sort of categorize that. And this adage that education is what's left after you've forgotten everything. But what is left? So they actually categorize that, and basic competencies, this Education Commission came up with in 1992. I'm quite impressed by that because it took UNESCO 1996 to come up with what they call 4 pillars of learning. They said 4 pillars of learning. It's learning to know, learning to do, learning to be, and learning to be together. So those are 4 pillars. And there were a lot of details under each. So, this is what children, after they pass their subjects, whatever, this is what should be right now we call them transversal competencies. These are competencies, 21st century competencies, whatever. But interesting, 1992, our Education Commission came up with that. But that is really, but still a very boring document. I think the problem is they were trying to be sort of policy virgins. We are not, oh no, we don't have anything to do with politics. As a result, I think it's a very boring document. It's very hard to read. You can get anywhere near the 1943 document. And actually, the Presidential Task Force report actually was based on that, they say. I have to check on that, but this Tara Dimel, who's my co-conspirator in the Education Forum, she's not here, she was apologetic. She said, oh, we could achieve only 10% of that. But I talked to people, I looked at that, so many new concepts were introduced. That task force report is a really good one. You can see a lot of thought had gone to it. And that's what, when a lot of thought goes into that, you get good policy, sometimes lasting, sometimes it doesn't. But one good thing is whether they last or not, they give us good, we can go back and learn from those. If you take Sri Lanka now, any concept you name, we have tried it. So we have enough experience. Competency-based education, and the school-based assessment, common general test, that is now for GCA level, there's something called common general test, like a bit like a SAT, but not as good. And new primary curriculum, 1999, it was totally competency-based. It said, what is about the trees and plants they need to know. In the curriculum, it says a child should appreciate and appreciate the greenery around. So all the learning outcomes, everything in the curriculum, they're fine. It's just the exams. In the exam, the scholarship exam, they ask people to name this, name that. But actually that curriculum reform is amazing. That curriculum is good, and I think even today it's valid. I had a good chance to go through that curriculum in detail. So these are, and it was competency-based. And compulsory education ordinance, at Gramanildari division, they looked for people who are not going to school and made sure children went to school. So I think we have 98% school attendance rate in primary, thanks to that. So I think these reforms were really, I think, they worked, and the report, I think, had an effect. Then National Education Commission comes in 2003, just what I call a laundry list of proposals, totally, removed from political, the reality, socio-political, whatever environment. And nobody takes that seriously. 150, 200 proposals. Why? All listed. Nobody takes it seriously. And then, interesting, this 2005 to 2015, Mahinda Rajapaksa government, actually, their main thing was 1,000 schools. And I think they did that, particularly Mr. Pandula Gunwardhan, I think. He got these 1,000, at least Mahindodaya Vidyagara, wherever you go, you can see that particular architecture. Those labs are there. But education first, again, these documents, policy documents, it's such a soulless document. And you can see donor agencies sort of kind of document. Nothing, you could, make big changes. Then NEC comes up with another list, which is interesting, 2016, when the new government has come, and their big thing is 13 years of education. What I find interesting is, you go through the National Education Commission proposals, they don't mention any of that. They're suggesting we should go for 12 years of education. At least that number they should have thought about. This new government comes in 2015, and the commission just, puts out their proposals. We've been working on this for the last 2 years. Let's just put it out. Totally unrelated, removed from uh, totally removed from political reality. So 13 years of education, and I'm going to talk a little more in detail about 13 years. What are the main items of the last UNP government? 13 years of education, nearest school is best school. That concept, different names, Navodaya, Isuru, 1,000 schools, nearest school is best school, same thing. But I think 13 years of education is a new concept. But when I first saw it in the manifesto, I was thinking, where did that come from? There was no discussion, nothing. And it's like, I'm sure it was something Mr. Ranveer Kasim scribbled on the back of an envelope, and it got to the manifesto. It's interesting, it's implemented as is. And they appoint a committee in 2017, and that's a sad state of policymaking in this country. They just say, okay, you want 13 years of education, you want a vocational stream, these are the, just come up with a list. Nothing, they don't, it was a golden opportunity. Actually, their report is titled Reforms for General Education. And they just let that go. It was sad, they just came up with another vocational stream, another bunch of subjects for A-level. So that was, I think, opportunity missed. They did actually a lot of good work in teacher deployment, Suraksha, and insurance program in terms of welfare, voucher program. But only thing is, voucher program, there was no document behind it. What happens, no analysis, what happens when the rogue cabinet of 52 day came, one of the first things in the cabinet is to remove the vouchers program, vouchers for uniform. Nothing, no explanation, say it's more cost effective. That's because the previous government did not do a cost benefit analysis. If it was there, at least somebody could have argued, Mr. Vijaydas Rajapaksa was the new education minister. First item in the cabinet was that, remove the vouchers. And this year, I think it's not going to be removed because one thing, it's not practical. And I think the new education minister is more reasonable, I would think. But, if you want lasting reforms, you need to have some good evidence backing that, so that, there's something they can continue. So my message here is, meaning policies need to be backed by, they need to have substance behind them. And of course, they can't be isolated from the politics. You can't have, so that brings the question with the National Education Commission, whether it's really is an effective instrument. That's another thing to talk about later. But so let's now get to the subject here. Actually, I just need to use a little bit of time to elaborate a little bit on what a good policy document would be. This is something I was part of this committee to reform the exams department, and something we learned is that the same TOR was given to another group 5 years earlier, and there was a report. And to find that, why wasn't that ever taken up? It was because there were 150, or I forget, 200 proposals. So a good policy document should be brief. And you should use design, should be designed. It can't be just a list. I think this is something, a design we came up with. I have it in Sinhala, but I put some English words there. And we said, we broke it into 4 areas, and the design was such that, you go back and forth, design was such that you can put only 4 or 3 proposals in there. So we had to get that from the original 180, we broke it down, and we had 3, 4 main categories, and the design in a way determined policy. And that helped us keep, had to go back and forth with the categories, because if one category had 3 proposals and another had 12, there's a problem with our structure. So a good policy document has to be brief. At least you should have one cover page which gives everything, and then it needs to have sort of, you need design thinking when you do a policy brief. So actually, we do this policy research course. Sorry, this sounds like a policy research course, but I can't help it. Okay, now we come to the presidential manifesto. Uh, Actually, I really read it for this talk, and I had really dismissed it because all I saw in that was that there's going to be every person who passes A level is going to go to university, everybody who doesn't gets technical, and government will fund that. And I thought, oh dear. But that is my first reaction. But then, when I looked at it, actually, look at this, all the 4 key things can be put on one slide. Good design. Um, 4 items. First one is about early childhood. And you have to give it to these guys. They have a way of using language. Particularly the singular one is pretty good. This, and then the second one is on rework in school education, this usual stuff, the nearest school is best school is now replaced by 1,000 schools. But this third one is really interesting. I have not seen it in a manifesto. That really, really gave me goosebumps. A student-centered education system in place of examination-centered education system. Nobody talked about the key problem, structure problem in our education system. It's not the inputs, it's not the process, it's how we measure the output, the exams. And they enable students to receive education without stress or delay. I think in the UNP manifesto this was there, but all they said is that we will introduce sports into the curriculum. They did not address this exam issue, and I think it's really, I was really happy to notice this. University education for all who qualify. It's a socio-political imperative. Higher vocational education to produce technocrats. And what I like is here there's a really a performance measure, which I'm not sure whether, whether just because you have trained people does not mean the labor force is going to change, because the labor force depends on, whether there's employment is created. But I think these are the 5 main points, and I like the fact that I can put them on one slide, which is a good sign. Good sign. I said, how do you judge a policy? I think it's a good sign. So let's look at this one. I'm not going to go into too much into this. Just so we have a measure: 1 preschool, 1 daycare center for each Brahmanidari division. Actually, the fact of the matter is we already do have, independent young women. Just this is a way of, making a living for them. And it's really a matter of getting them. And I like the getting them for helping them to get more formal. State patronage to establish, they don't say state, which is with state patronage, and all good stuff. And what's nice about this, there's already a World Bank project, very good one. And so this, I think, is truly achievable. There's already money until 2021. So this is fine. I think both UMP also had a plan for early childhood, and that's fine. I'm not going to talk more about this. But you have to note that it is a provincial matter. I hope they realize that, because there's this tendency for the center to try to do everything. Even if you get to the provinces, you can still think of districts, divisions, but I think that's, I'm not going to talk too much about it, but re-evacuating school education, we have again performance integrator, increase the number of national schools. This is again popular, proposal. Infrastructure, and then teachers. I think they've thought about teachers. There's somebody who's actually, I think there's thinking behind this, somebody who understands teacher concerns. That teachers need to have a teacher service, they need to have moving from national schools to provincial schools is amazing difficult. All those are there. And convert existing 18 national colleges of education to university faculties. So this is one part of their strategy to increase the number of university opportunities. Welfare, interesting, we have given every welfare possible to our children. Now this is about school transport. But I news flash, I just want to, this is spoiler, but here, there's a news item here, 72% of the national school principal positions are vacant. I mean, that's going to be our big problem, finding principals. We had Navodaya schools, Isuru schools, we had plans for 1,000 schools. Everywhere the problem is finding principals. One program manager told me they actually had some principals and 10 of them, because they find these retired people, and they died during the program from heart attacks. So this is a serious problem that we need to address. I'll come to that in higher education section. So this one is, I think, there's really new stuff here. From examination-centered to student-centered. And how do we do this in a practical way? School curriculum must be made lighter. I don't know, you have seen grade 6 to 8, 15 subjects they do. One child, I was visiting my aunt in the rural areas, and one child has been listening to me talking, and she had told her mother, "Ane amma auntie kiyanna baida me kadu karanna kiyala." 15. The thing is, all the teachers give them homework, all the 15 subjects. They don't need to. So it's really we should really look at, if you have any children going to government schools, the load is just ridiculous. Digitalize, age limit, that again, I think, whether, I don't think they're correct, I'll show you. New test, student IQ at grade 6, year 6. I think this is something there was a committee to reform scholarship exam, and I was part of that. We made this proposal. This is one of the proposals that we made. You take the, when you design exam, you have to say what's the objective of the exam. I learned it from Kandankara report. There are two types of exams: aptitude exams, where you check the potential, and there's attainment exams, achievement, whether they've learned the subjects. What we've done is, what was the aptitude exam, we put in the education attainment part to that. Because they thought teachers were not teaching in the schools. So they've added, there are 30 questions in the scholarship exam. I analyzed the past 15 years of exams. There were about 50 plants, 70 animals that were referenced there. They asked, what do they eat? How do they propagate? So child going into exam, imagine, you don't know which 50 they are going to ask from, which 50 animals, which 50. For the sky, there are 10 diagrams of Orion, all these. They have to remember, just doesn't matter what happens in the sky, there are pictures. So those 30 questions have to be taken out, and I think, and it has to be taken back to IQ exam, which tests the aptitude, the potential, and take away the attainment part. So I think it's there. I'm really happy about this. And this is to measures to physical and mental punishments. Actually, this one, I'll come back to that. It's actually not relevant to this. This is Wolf, Alison Wolf, 2001. I really discovered that later. And what really shows is what they say, school education is what matters. Higher education, mass higher education, really is just a socio-political imperative. You do that to make mass higher education. Remember, it's only mass. So, and even in school education, it's what they learning outcomes we need to focus on. So university education for all who qualify. This was the one that grabbed the attention of the press. Everyone, I like that. This, this SLPP or SLP, their manifestos have these interesting lines. In 2005, I remember, it said, I know all of you would like a government job. ඔබ සැම ආණ්ඩුවේ රැකියාවට කැමති බව මම දනිමි. එම නිසා therefore I will increase government jobs by this much. And Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa went on to do that. So they really, feel they know what people are thinking. And unfortunately, just go down right to the bottom and fulfill that. But this is another thing. However much we say, we need more skilled people, we need vocational education. I'll say it in my next slide. vocational education is for somebody else's child. Do we know anybody who here, any of our friends, children of friends and family who do vocational training education? No. But everybody now, what's happened is all aspirations have been democratized. Everybody wants their child to have a degree, which is true. And I think my first reaction to this was, oh no, but I think it's very realistic. And it is not difficult. You need 120,000 because we know a lot of people fail the O levels, fail the A levels, so it's 120,000. And actually, if you take some of these higher national diplomas at our state institutions, they really waste a lot of time. Uh, SLEAT has four-year program and they give them a diploma at the end. So I think that's again very new ones, Kotalara Defense to be expanded. Aesthetics, 10 university colleges affiliated to aesthetics um, faculties, highest unemployment for aesthetics graduate. I mean, that's something we have to face. But I think technology, again, vocational, there are so many, I think, vocational training institutes that you can give people a degree. I mean, that's right now, most of these courses are very paper and pencil oriented. Distance education, then again, professional qualification leading degrees through, again, just one step more to tell people you can have a degree. Maybe they will not, it will not be so easy. At least people who go into this are told you can have a degree. I think giving people hope is important. What happens when these people come out as graduates? The problem is there, but I think it's a socio-political imperative that these kind of provisions are there. This is actually I learned after I really looked through this. My first reaction was no, but you know, you have to think about that from the perspective of parents and students who just finished school and what are their aspirations. Quality, that's blah blah. You know, you can't have quality. Um, it's it's going to be, it's an issue, but we talk about that. And student life, I think that's very interesting one. Tax breaks for providing hostels. I think they actually went through, Dhammika Perera had a series of articles and there were quite a few everywhere there were these tax breaks and I think that was a good idea they've taken from wherever. And interesting, Mahapolo, all the usual stuff. Um, the only, but I like to, you know, this is, but all this is fine, this is, you know, meeting the people's expectations, but really this Alison Wolf's book, it really pulls together all the evidence, and we have known that mass higher education, note the word mass higher education has no impact on economic development. It's just a socio-political just imperative. And but that does not mean that higher education is not important. If somebody was to focus only on efficiency, what we need is top schools and then people going into research universities, few research universities. In Sri Lanka, 3 will do. That is what we really need to do for efficiency, if we're interested in efficiency. 3 research universities and top class. And the rest, you know, well, if you're interested in efficiency, no. Higher education, it's there. They can do it out of their own pockets. Because, and the only, because research shows is that the only key link between economic growth and higher education is the training of a small cadre of researchers and innovators. You know, because of Silicon Valley and there's this Route 120, that's the original sort of Silicon Valley in Boston, you get the idea that, okay, university education is innovation and growth. No, mass university higher education has nothing to do with growth or innovation. So, but that is the truth, and nobody, politicians don't listen to that. Even in UK, they gave Alison Wolf a dameship. She was made a dame. But her ideas, nobody follows. So we know that higher education, mass higher education doesn't make, but it's a socio-political imperative. I think my suggestion is to, we have to live with it. But keep taking our attention to school education. Higher vocational education to produce technocrats, that's fourth one. and they have a clear performance target there. And this really makes me think there's really about, because I was the Director General of the Tertiary and Vocational Education Commission at the time when NVQ was introduced. And some of this information is very esoteric, very important, but very subtle details. And I'm happy to see those there. So they are just but they don't, if you remember the first slide, the technical colleges are going to be more aligned with the higher education. And if they're expanding at the Ceylon German, the CGTIs, which I think is a good thing. Um, this is again to technical university because that's the only way to attract students to these technical courses. Even in Germany, where the dual system is supposed to be the, the gold standard, they are now promising the students that there'll be a degree at the end. I don't know, maybe it's this knowledge economy terminology. People, skills are, you say, what skills? It's knowledge that's important. So people are going for degree. So I think the only way to attract students to vocational education is to offer them at the degree, whether they go there or not. It's a marketplace that has to really attract, increase the enrollments to technical and vocational, because if they pay better money if you have a technical skills, then people will go to those. The other thing is the students will be able to postgraduate degrees, which is again, when they want to do a master's or something, you need some recognition for these technical courses. Hotel school courses, I know some of them, if you have a hotel school qualification, you can go to have a postgraduate programs. Student welfare, this is very interesting. Mahapola and all those Mahapola scholarship is going to be extended to the technical and vocational, which is going to be a huge expenditure where this is coming from, but from equity. I said, in good policy, you have to balance equity, efficiency, and effectiveness. Politicians tend to go towards the equity side, and how they're finding how they're going to fund this another problem. And this is something, I think this trend is a consequence of this realization that everybody's realizing, you're telling people to go into technical and vocational, and technical and vocational, this is Alison Wolf's chapter 3, a great idea for other people's children, the decline and fall of vocational education. So I think vocational education and higher education, it has to merge, and that is the way it's going. There was a time during 2004, 2001, 2004 government, we had only one Minister of Education. And one Minister of Tertiary Education, Mr. Kabir Hashim, he had both higher education and technical and vocational education. At that time, we were looking to at least bring together all the technical vocational institutes together, but I think it's time for those two sectors to integrate. And I think the way this is going, I think it's aligning the technical and vocational stream with the higher education is, I think, it's a good way to move. If you want people to have more skills, I think it's the industry sector council. They are the people who have to get in there and make sure that people have the industry skills they need. So this is, I just did this to compare Malaysia and Sri Lanka. If now we are going to have all these people with technology degrees, look at the left side, that is the higher level occupation, senior professionals, technical and associate professionals. Malaysia is red and we are blue, and we need to increase those jobs. These jobs are not going to increase just because you have people coming out of whatever you call it, technical college, universities, university colleges. You can give names, but it's the economy that's going to drive it. I have this really nice quotation from Dr. Sakkarachi, who said who compared Lakshmi to the economy and Saraswati to the education. If Lakshmi doesn't dance, if Lakshmi is not cooperating, Saraswati, however much Saraswati dance, it doesn't work. So I think all this is fine if the economy takes off. All these trained people, they'll find jobs, but otherwise there's going to be real big issues down the road. Um, so missing, so, I started with this really, sarcastic attitude to the manifesto, and I'm actually a bit of a fan. I can't believe I found pleasantly surprised. And missing in the manifesto is a very key element. I said missing in previous manifestos or political policies was this focus on the learning outcomes, that we're measuring the wrong thing, the exams. And this is the actors, and this is a typical thing you use in planning. Bottom are the actors and institutions, and then the processes, learning environment, curricula, and all that. They are the people who make sure those things are happening and your learning outcomes. This is a quote I take from the National Education Commission, 2003. It was buried there. But I was so happy to see that, because that's the first time somebody, you come up with a list of things to do. Oh, we need to do teacher training this way, curricula this way, but nobody talks about the elephant in the room, which is, these institutions are not working, they're dysfunctional. So they identify these three: extreme politicization, lack of coordination within ministry and agencies. We did a study on state enterprises, we have ministries, then we have ministries 30 say, we have departments 100 plus, then we have statutory bodies which were established to make them more efficient, and then we have state-owned enterprises, 550 nearly. All three, they were supposed to do three different things, but now they are all bureaucracies doing the same thing and getting in each other's stare and just stopping each other from doing things. It is whatever all this is the, I think, in education, I was thinking if you were to address anything, this will be, because the rest is, I think the manifesto is pretty good. There seems to be a good thinking behind. I don't know who was behind this, but I'm happy there's some good thinking behind it. But this issue, I just got these numbers. We have students, 4.2 million students in the system. I rounded the numbers. 240,000 teachers. I went to the budget document for the Ministry of Education. 60,000 people in the ministry. This does not count the provincial ministries. So for every 4 teachers, we have some official. I think, and then exams, National Institute of Education publications, where they on a daily basis they have to produce things, real services. That's only 1,500. I think this number has to go to 1,500. Because there are 50 branches in the ministry. And nobody, once they establish a branch, I don't know, nobody knows, there should be sunsets on. So I think this 60,000, bringing it down to 1,500 is because ministries are supposed to be formulate policy, monitor. That they should not be doing things. There are agencies to do that. So I think this is a key. If civil society is interested, I think this is somewhere for attention. And this is where I got the data from. I think I'll quickly, I was going to stop that, it's a bit long, but I just wanted to just give a couple of slides on some of the research we've done. Not actually, this is some other people's research and mine own. Student progress ages 5 to 18. Interesting, Sri Lanka is right at the left, then US, UK, Malaysia, Singapore, and Finland. You can see we are the people who test people really at a young age, 5. So actually, at least moving that to year 6 in school would bring us in line, which is actually, it's in the manifesto, in the plans of the uh, uh, new government. Interesting is in Singapore, they have a killer exam for primary children. It's called primary school leaving exam, but you can see it happens much later. And then they stream the students into express, normal academic, express, normal academic, and normal technical. They in the manifesto they're talking about streaming, some sort of streaming, beginning 6. I mean, those are things we need to discuss, but there's enough, international practices we can draw upon. This one is a week in a student's life. This is my colleague Mampitiya, Upali Mampitiya's work. And you can see the current practice, he found that actually we spent essentially most of our time on exams, preparing for exams. And actually, we are doing way more than we need to for comparable time as children in other countries spend. So what's proposed is bring down, and we test our students on 9 subjects. Actually, they do 15 in 6, 7, 8, and then they bring down to 9, and they're tested on those. The proposal is you have only 6 subjects that are tested done, and these are the 40 hours in periods in a week, and the rest of the 10, what I would call no exam zone. So I think that's very important, would be a very important policy reform, and that's something we should push for. Uh, this is an assessment framework we did. Again, what you're saying is the exam should be only one part of a student's record, and the second column, school certificate, which includes sort of like a SAT exam. We do that anyway for primary now. And then to take content out, there'll be aptitude test, attainment test, no. So the dark part is where the test national exams, and the light part is no national test zone. So, and even school-based assessments, I think you can do a portfolio concept, and actually I've done some research on that, how to assess student portfolios. I won't talk into that because time is limited. Again, this is a school level. You have something called summative assessment and formative assessment. Summative assessment is, you know what, see whether they have done what they need to do at the end of that with a test. Summative is as the child learns, you test for informing the child and the parents. So those things, and I think this portfolio concept is very important. But one of the main things about, we say 21st century competencies, but why they're not being implemented is because we have no way of testing or recording them. What gets measured is what gets done. So we have done some research on how to actually measure these. You don't measure the student. You assess the school environment. You can assess it through the portfolios and the other things children keep. We did I will just quickly show that action research we did in Ampara. 21st century competencies, we said subject competency plus what's called transversal competency. Transversal competency is what crosses the subject knowledge. So I think it's wrong to just take subject competency out. A lot of people who say 21st century competency, all these soft things. And parents are saying, how do we know children have learned? We need tests. So subject competency and plus, I think, is a practical thing, and we don't have to reinvent them. They have been there. And in Ampara, we just put them into Vishaya Nipunata, Pudgal Nipunata, Purvas Nipunata, subject competency, personal competency, and citizen competency. And we actually tested those. Uh, we actually came up with, we collected from 50 schools, from each grade, we collected the student portfolios, student journals, and we developed a method to assess not the child, but the school and each class. With each class is giving the child 21st century competencies. And yeah, no, I think this is not necessary, but let me just, yeah. And we assess that with these other zonal director, and we have some the officials called in-service advisors. So we already have most of the infrastructure. It's not difficult. These in-service advisors can play this role. So yes, so to conclude, actually, I think um, the campaign promises, no, they are actually more promising than I looked at. There's more to be done. Civil society has to particularly be vigilant about this, what's not addressed in these manifestos. This is the structural problems of our institutions, dysfunctional institutions. But otherwise, I think this new emphasis, new thinking about, at least new realization that examinations are the key problem in our education system, and there's a political will now to change those. I think it's a good sign. Um, And I'm happy that most of these things are in they will implement those, because then our work is reduced, and I can spend more time with my grandchildren, I hope. So I hope the campaign promises are kept, and they will work on those. Thank
So in Sri Lanka, we have the NVQ levels and then we have the university systems.
Yeah.
And so in order that things don't, NVQ doesn't become something for other people's children, there is
Right.
a possibility that you sort of run these parallel courses where you can transfer between one to the other and that to the other. So you're not stuck in that particular tract once you join it. And that sort of it sort of makes it more attractive because
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's why having this, we actually, when I was at TVC, we developed this, there are these three parts, through the job, actually you can progress. Then the vocational path, NVQ path, and the more academic path. And even in Singapore, they stream students at year, I think 6 something, I forget now. But there's laddering, there's possibility of crossing. And I think if we give people the option of, say you have NVQ level 4, and then you have an option of doing some additional courses and going to a degree, I think it's there. I think here it's given as a way of, just because everybody wants a degree, it's not a good rationale. But I think that path, giving that path is very important. I like that what's in these proposals. You have to give the path. And if industry wants, they don't want, they think, somebody is overeducated, they're more than, they just their attitudes, and it's not what you want, then it's up to industry, I think, to industry councils to hire these people, pay them more. So the market, students will gravitate to degree programs. And I think it's correct. 5 years ago, I would have said no, but it's been now sort of drilled into me that I don't know anybody who is in vocational education. Why am I advocating it for others? So we should give that path. It's a matter of giving the path, whether people follow it or not.
Hi, Doctor. I work for Parliament. Actually, I'm advisor and consultant of the sectoral education, sectoral committee for the education and human resources. Actually, I studied all three manifestos from the three major candidates. There were very significant information on that, and particularly this one is aligning with what we have been doing for last 1.5 years. Under the name of STEM education reforms, although it's not entirely STEM, we were trying to integrate the STEM education to the national education system. In that particular policies, we would say, they were teacher training, capacity building, and then elimination of certain exams. For example, what they have proposed in grade 5, to bring back the IQ based, and bring the education burden from, take it out from the students, including the preschool education. So right now in the preschool education, at the last semester, they are trying to teach writing and reading for the students, which is not necessary. We were trying to bring that out, and I'm really glad to be here today discussing this. It won't be too hard for the new government to implement these, because we have already done that, and hopefully the new government will accept our proposals and they will take it forward. At the same time, the vocational training also, just like in the Singapore model, from grade 8 to grade 10, we have already put like academic and vocational baskets, which students can parallelly ladder like that. So it's great. Actually, it's a great analysis from you, and I'm glad it will work out, hopefully.
I just want to get your insight into the harmonization of the private school system and the public school system. What usually happens is that the private school system or the international school system, children are bred to do like London A levels. A lot of times they can't sit for the local A levels. They end up going abroad, and you have this, continuation of the brain drain. Second thing is, wanted to know, so there are many stakeholders in the education system, and one of the big bottlenecks is the willingness of the institutions or teachers to, to change the ways that they teach, or to follow or incorporate some of these reforms. For example, sex education, right? There's a huge reluctance for teachers to do that. The second thing is, I just wanted to get your thoughts on, uh, or if you came across the priority given to special education, special needs education. In the previous budget, I think when it came to special education, a big chunk of that allowance, or the budget was allocated to Pirivenas, and that was clumped in with the special education, special needs education. So I just want to get your insight as to that, if you've noticed any priorities given to special needs funding.
Should I answer those? Yeah. One thing there's no mention of regulating private education. And I'm glad, because the government should first get its act together, I think. So I'm glad private education is not, because right now at least it gives parents some, avenue. I know some people who just could not afford to pay the bribes that you need to put them into a public school of their choice, and they chose public schools. So that's something I will look more in detail. I'm glad it's not there, because right now I think the government, if somebody says government should regulate public school, private schools, I would say first they should get that together. Private schools, that's the main points. They have their own association. They should go for self-regulation before the government tries to regulate them. No, we need to go there, but I think the more important thing is public education. The second one is whether, teachers, whether teachers are teaching certain things and not other things. I think if we take the examination burden out from the teachers, uh, that will take jobs away from the teachers who are now, their teachers are doing tuition, but it, you don't need new teacher training. Actually, if you look at what they're taught in the teacher training colleges, they're taught good teaching methods. They just don't get to practice their craft, because they just can't cover the syllabus. So if we lighten the syllabus, I really like the word, they use the word lighten the load, lighten the syllabus. That I think will change the teaching profession. It'll take a while, but I think it'll happen. How they teach, it's again, fix the end, begin with the end. If we fix the exams, I think the rest is easier. The last one is about special education. Actually, I have not, no, I can't answer that. I haven't really looked at that. Yeah, no, sorry, I can't answer that.
Yeah, I'm Kamal Abhyasinha. I was passionate about the entire school to work transition process, and I have done some work there. There is this fourth industrial revolution in the making right now, and it is predicted that maybe 60% of the jobs that people perform today are going to disappear in the next 5 to 10 years. And many countries have taken initiatives to align even the education system to meet the challenges posed by the fourth industrial revolution. For example, I was in Singapore last week. They expect 44% of the workforce to be out of employment unless they are reskilled and upskilled. So they have started a process, set up a skill fund, and promoting even in bus terminals, they promote people to sign up for upskilling and reskilling. But we are not ready. We have not taken any cognizance of this kind of a tsunami that is going to come and hit us in the next couple of years. Now, how do we didn't discuss anything. I didn't find anything in this manifesto, in the points that you discuss, that addresses these challenges. So how do we meet those challenges, number one? And we talked about STEM education, and now I think they have even progressed to STEAM education. bringing even art and aesthetics into the equation. Now, that also serves a purpose because according to the World Economic Forum 2018 findings, the kind of soft skills and workplace skills that they have identified do not capture any of the technical skills, but some, soft and life skills which are captured. And we don't pay much attention to developing those in our students. So that's another challenge. So how do we meet all these challenges and reform the education system to prepare our young ones to meet the realistic challenges they are going to face in the future?
Yeah. Um, Actually, one thing I like about this manifesto is they don't use the word 21st century competencies or STEM. These are, because they are addressing some of the core issues that should be addressed before that. And STEM is, I think, highly misunderstood. I've heard some people say, we need more science, technology, engineering, mathematics graduates. Totally not true. What we need is more scientific concepts integrated into other everyday thinking, the whole curriculum. So all that actually will be, I'm sorry, I have to go in the book. If you look at the transversal competencies identified by NEC way back, 1992, and by UNESCO, I like the UNESCO criteria, critical and innovative thinking, intrapersonal, interpersonal, citizenship, media, and digital literacy. I think we don't need to bring any new words, STEM, STEAM. STEAM is there in critical and innovative thinking. And so how do we, the problem is that we have not been able to test those or assess those. Test is the wrong word, assess those. And why we have not been able to, before assessing, give those to children is because of the examination burden. So I think we first have to address that. And I think that once they address that, I think I showed this one. This is something actually we gave as part of our strategic plan for the exams. They can't do anything about it. But this has gone into the mainstream, sort of. The Kandangar lecture that was delivered by my colleague, he actually put forward this. This is a student's achievement is not judged solely. Let's take the last one, advanced secondary school certificate, the GCA level. The three subjects are actually only one part of the student's record. It will be like in the US. US, you get the high school certificate, and the advanced placement is what you do. Actually, our GCA level subjects are like advanced placement. If you want to study in the university, in depth, if you want to show you have in-depth knowledge, GCA level subjects are needed. So here the GCA level subjects are like advanced placement if you want to demonstrate particular subject knowledge. But CGT, Common General Test, is something like the SAT. It's to be improved, and if they improve the first one, the Common General Test for the primary school children, which is the only test they will ever take, IQ test, and that can be sort of every stage you have, if you get our national exam system to do that. Right now our national exam system, they do 52 subjects for the GCA level and in 3 languages. It's an incredible operation. We have to shut down all that. They need to be testing only 6 subjects for students. And then, but they need to develop, they need to develop a scholastic aptitude test. See, with the GCA level, we are testing attainment, whether they have learned the subject, not the aptitude. So the aptitude is actually shown by, you can do this written test and school-based assessments, which are, in just your report card and the marks you get for those. Of course, there's a quality issue. That's why you have these national level subject exams. Then the portfolios. I think this portfolio concept is something that students will learn from primary school. In Ampar experiment, we got students to keep a journal. They don't take any notes for any other subjects. All they do is they write their observations, what they learned, not the teacher's notes. They write what they learned. When they went for go for a field trip, they write about that. You can tell a lot about what the student has learned. We could not, but the parents, when they want the notes, so because of the scholarship exam, you can't do any of those. So I think the reforms, major reforms, before we talk about 21st century competencies, STEM anything, the examination system is what we should focus on. Once that's done, then this kind of framework can be put into place. The dark part is the dark yellow, is the gold yellow is the exam zone, national exam. This is a no exam zone. Children now will not be facing exams. They'll be, maybe they'll have quizzes every day after once a week, but maybe initially people will worry that it's not going to be, they're not going to be learning, but we have something called in-service advisors. I think the people in the ministry, the 60,000, they should be retrained and sent as, to schools. It's not an inspectorate. There's an idea of, there's an inspectorate. After talking to teachers, I realized inspectorate has a very threatening sound to it. This in-service advisors was developed, the service was developed to just counter that. They work with the teachers. So we work with in-service advisors in Ampara, and if we find that the teacher is not creating the environment in the classroom for these transversal competencies, then you work with the teacher. You don't grade the children by anyone, because you can't grade children for these attributes. But what you can grade is the classroom environment and the school environment, and I think it can be done. So to answer your question, I think I'm glad these buzzwords are not there, because before we go to that, we need to fix the exam system. Once the exam system is fixed, then we can talk about these, how do we give these skills and how do we assess those. But right now, however much we talk, we can talk and talk, but nothing's going to happen, because at the end of the day, what gets done is what is measured. And only thing that's measurable and assessed right now is how many pass the GCO level, how many pass the GCA level. And, uh, and then the schools just don't have this time. I showed you this period. They don't have time. They spend all their 40 hours in school preparing for exams. We need to release that time, 10 hours at least in a week. If we do that, then we can stop talking about, how do we give these skills to the children? How do we assess? But this step has to happen. Without that, there's no point in talking about it, in my opinion.
Hi. Currently in Sri Lanka, the age limit for compulsory education is 14. So can't we extend that age limit into 18, as well as from grade 1 to until O levels, we are having specified free books from government, but we don't have any specified books for A levels. Why is that?
That's actually, I was shocked to hear that we didn't have textbooks. And we are blaming the tuition teachers. The tuition teachers are providing an incredibly valuable service. Because that's the only way we level the playing field for children. You spend the day traveling to Kurunegala from the Waima district, but you get, what you need to know for the exam. So actually, I heard in the last 2 years, now the textbooks are becoming available. And actually, if you go to the NIE website, you can download. Um, yes, I was shocked to hear that we don't have textbooks. And I remember we went to one of these seminars, on economic issues. We were launching a book for Pathfinder. It was and we had school children, and we were expecting some questions for them. But there was somebody in the panel who was a paper setter for the exam, and the questions they asked were incredible on economics. They say there are 3 things for this, but this teacher says there's 4 things. There are 4 categories. Which one is correct? I mean, that's because they have no way of knowing that. But tuition teachers really gather the information, they do the intelligence, they study the past papers, and they really give the students a good layout of what to expect. So no, textbooks, actually the TAPS program, I think really made sense for A-levels. If they had as their objective would have been, make learning materials aware, textbooks accessible to students. But at that time, when we start talking about TAPS in 2016, the textbooks were not available, but they're only coming in now. I was shocked to hear myself that that they were not there. Compulsory education, actually, I think it should stay at 14. Because I think there are some people who are 16, not definitely 18. A lot of people are leaving school to get foundation degrees and go on. I think some people are ready to leave school. I would not want, you need to make it interesting for students to stay in school. 13 years of education, I really think, I mean, there are good ideas, but why would students want to go to a school that failed them? You know, why spend same time with the same teachers? So I think I would prefer to have it looser.
Can I?
I,
Uh, I have quite a few questions here. I'll try to be rapid and
Yeah.
not dominate the mic here. Now, I have never figured out this 13 years because basically it is actually 12 years. And between O level, sometime in December and this thing, they are waiting at home for results. So, can you clarify for me? Do we have really 12 years that we spend 13 years, or do we really have 13 years of education?
No, 13 years is actually the international norm. Our problem is waiting time. See, it has become more than actually even 13 here because of waiting time. I think the waiting time is going to be reduced, and all the children can now come to school in January.
So after how many years do you do O level?
After
11.
11, 15,
So
16,
so
all
you start counting from KG, is it?
KG. Yeah, in the US, it's our year one is KG in the US.
Right.
Right.
So that do all schools in Sri Lanka have KG?
No, we call it year one. We used to have KG, then we moved to year one.
Okay. So
Yeah.
the grade 1 is now year 2.
Yeah, too. There have been changes. They've actually, yeah. But now, what's called KG in some countries is year one in Sri Lanka. But internationally, everybody now starts school at 5 years of age, and 18 they complete. Our problem is this waiting time.
So but our people are 19 now when they finish.
That's because it's a waiting time. They wait for the exam results to come.
Okay.
uh, Once we eliminate that, and people sit and resit the exams. So, but
Okay.
I was also thinking my original idea was 12 years, but then after I saw this, I realized internationally, I mean, this 13 years is the norm. People leave school system 16. You know, in Singapore, you can go to the polytechnics. If you take the normal technical course, then you can go to, there are multiple pathways after 16. So I think that's why it's important not to make 18 compulsory.
Okay. My next question
Yeah.
is something that I was perplexed why you put that. You had the current and proposed subjects,
Yeah.
no? And I think I
Yeah.
sent you an email of an interview with Gulbai. Why are you putting 5 hours for religion? Why are we teaching religion in school?
I mean, let's choose our battles, I would say.
Now you're increasing the number of hours.
This is because if you are, I think this particular person's proposal, if we give equal weightage, when you report your results, if you give equal weightage to a subject, and then it should have the same number of contact hours, or there's a word for that. No, not notional learning, but you need same number of learning hours.
Have you got any benchmarking data? Say, take Asia. How many countries teach religion in school?
I won't even look at that right now. I
No,
think,
no, but just
yeah.
curious. My recollection
Yeah.
is I think even in India they don't teach religion in
No.
school.
In the UK, actually, they've introduced this values education and something.
Right.
But what they found is actually, when you take values out of religion, it's easier to, no, it didn't work. I read something on UK, but they're struggling with it.
But
Um,
even from an Asian perspective, just look
that,
at
yeah,
the
that's a
elephant
good
in the room,
question.
India. I don't
Yeah.
think they. I mean, I
Right.
have gone
Yeah.
to 2 years school in India. They
Yeah.
didn't teach.
Right. But I think here it will be a little bit difficult to get into that, right? Yeah. Yeah. That will be in the electives. In the electives, we have citizenship is in the electives, and I think it should not be a subject that's to be tested. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sure. But I think at this stage, I would focus, I think, energies on just getting the reducing the number of exams. If they want to test religion, that's an easy exam to do.
So
You're right.
yes, my
We
next
need to come to
question.
that, but I think I would put that as a low priority at this
Okay.
point.
Okay, my next one,
Yeah.
Sujata, is that to me, one of our biggest challenges in this economy is people do not understand economics, which identify a well-being. It's the poorest
Yeah.
understood subject.
True. It's
So
not here.
in
Yeah.
your list,
Yeah.
I would definitely have economics, commerce, that kind of thing,
Yeah.
because our well-being is highly dependent on that.
Yeah.
And politicians give, as Lee Kuan Yew said, our elections are an auction of non-existing resources, and the people get fooled every time.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
that was a quick suggestion. The next one was
It's in elective set one, I think.
Yeah.
But it's an elective. That is true. Yeah.
So the next one is about pedagogy,
Yeah.
right? Now, still you are touching on classroom teacher.
Yeah.
But if you look, I don't know whether you have read Salman Khan's book, The New Schoolhouse, etc.
Yeah.
This whole disruption in education has happened, and you can get the best teacher to sit and teach on YouTube. You can roll it out for 1 million kids. I mean, quite literally. Why haven't you spoken about a change in pedagogy?
Um, Actually, it's really, I think this IT in education is really a little bit overrated. I think IT children actually end up using at home to support their teaching.
No, just videos. Videos. You have a great teacher
Yeah.
teaching,
Yeah.
video it, break it down to bite size, like how Khan Academy does.
Yeah.
So then you are not dependent on a subpar teacher. All the kids have the access to the best teachers in Sri Lanka.
Um, do we have some, whatever it is, it's a classroom, you have to, most of the time they spend, you know, getting the children to behave in the classroom. I think ladies' college, I've seen some attempts at this one school where I think I went to 3 schools to see how they use IT in schools. Ladies' college is Patana and then Ranabima Royal in Kandy. Uh, I think teachers are using creative ways within the existing system, but I think we are, if you take Finland, actually they use very little technology in the classroom. It is, you just exchange, you send emails, you exchange with the students after school because you have so little time in the classroom and you don't want children looking at their, devices. I think the IT should be for the teacher, at least at this stage. We really need to give the IT for the teacher.
Okay, my last question is about English, the English language education. Now, here you're talking about language.
Yeah.
Now, if we are going to create a competitive workforce, I mean, the medium of instruction has to move towards English, at least a very high level of English competency.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised that even English as a second language, the fail rate in O level is some 60% or something, 65. I mean, that's like baby English. I mean, what's your ideas on that?
Yeah, because our English teachers, our basic qualification is to have passed the O-level English. They actually can't speak English, and the problem is one of the knock-on effects of the there have been more opportunities in the higher education sector for employment is that fewer and fewer people are going into school education. In the old days, women from elite families, they ended up teaching English in schools. We don't have that. And actually, I've been doing some classes for the last year. Every Sunday, just going to the library in Sivali Place and Matakulia, spending 1 hour with children, just talking to them, playing Ganupuri Malpalaturu, categories with them in English. And I realized, they pick up like that. If they get a chance to speak with somebody who is fluent. So I couldn't expand that program because you can't find enough volunteers. And actually, I think TV is the best medium, I think, for that. Children watching Hindi films, they learn Hindi in no time. So actually, I'm writing a letter to the librarian, my experience summarizing, and we need to really make a push for our TVs. Our TVs, all the cartoons are dubbed. So it's not in the schools. We don't have the capacity to teach good English. There's a plan to hire 50,000 new assistants. I think we need to really focus on people who are, English, and they need to be animators and that kind of thing. For we had started primary, and I think we had started cartoons. For schools don't have the capacity to do English. Um, they'll teach they'll teach children to write, copy from the book. So I think if you want any, after my 1 year of experience, more than 1 year, working with children every Sunday from these areas, I just realized they'll catch like that, but they need exposure every day. And what's the best way to do that? Not the schools. Nobody who's fluent in English would ever get a job in the schools. They will be doing something else. So we really have to go to mass media, and TV is the best medium, I think, for English. We really need to go to the major TV channels and make sure there's at least one good, they buy these cheap cartoons and dub them. We need at least one good cartoon running every day, which is starting with for aiming the young children. That's the only way to do the English. Otherwise, we are never going to. There's a Grand Canyon, people who speak English at home and people who don't speak English at home. We can't. I thought we could bridge that by volunteers. People who are more privileged, they're volunteering in that time. Nobody has the time now, so it has to be through mass media, broadcast media.
Hi, Doctor. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. My question is, how do we nurture the students to become independent learners? I think education should be a lifelong process rather than sticking to a timetable in school. And it's actually difficult because once students start the higher education, like from senior school, that is from grade 9 to 12, they are trained to go for classes and other tuition centers.
Yeah.
The students are finding it difficult to learn, and they have to cut down all their extracurricular activities. They don't even enjoying the learning process. So how do we bring a change to that system in our country?
I think again, I sound like a broken record, but the exam system, because in the biology stream, I remember there's a question what are the diseases communicated by viruses? But in the syllabus, common cold is not there. So, if you answer all the marking schemes are for influenza and all that, common cold is not there. So, children have to know what's going to be asked at the exam. Actually, I was doing at a higher level. For one institution, I was in the part of the group that was moderating the questions. So I told the person who said in the question, I don't understand this question. And he said, don't worry, they understand. Because the class is taught for the question. So it's the exams that's stopping our children from being independent thinkers. I think at least we can free up this area. Even that area, the curriculum load is reduced. And no longer the GCA level is the school leaving qualification, but there's a broader qualification. And if we can free up, we have no exam zones in our school timetable, I think that children will be independent thinkers, I think. No, I think we have to, actually some of the teachers have some of the worst values. It's amazing. Caste system and other things you think have gone away, but they treat children differently, children from wealthy families differently. I think values should not be taught, can't be taught. Its values come from the school environment. So I think I would take things away from the curriculum, sex education kind of thing. Actually, there was a good book, textbooks for that. Children, teachers didn't want, yeah, was their response, So we have a long way to go, but I think values and things, I think we have to talk about things we have to take away from the curriculum. And values are, we absorb from the school environment. It will take a while. Our values are, if a child has AIDS or has contact with AIDS, the whole society, rejects them. Those values, they're going to take a while. We can't put them in the syllabus and take them away.
Madam, I have a question. I don't know whether I got it to your presentation correctly. In fact, it is a doubt. You mentioned that mass education don't have impact to the economic growth.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, so, but in Sri Lanka, the contention is that, especially when you consider economists, they are of the view that education is the only way to come up with the middle income trap. I mean, recently when Mr. Dr. Kumar Swamy I saw one of the interview where he preaches that sentiment. I mean, how do you really express the paradoxical situation? In addition to that, I just want to add the initial discussion that you mentioned about the video teaching. In fact, I heard that from the Mr. Dhammika Perera presentation. He mentioned that he just filming some sort of teaching things from with the reputed teachers. I mean, the intention is that just to functioning is as a CSR project of their company. I mean, it just added up to the earlier contention.
Yeah, actually, no, this video teaching that happens actually. What happens is, I tell you one example I learned from this Ranabir Royal. What the one teacher said is, we are going to teach tomorrow's subject is circulation. You are going to do a presentation. Go to the web, find my things, and actually the students got into three groups and they did three parts of the circulation. So I think there are ways of doing that. It's happening. There are children know there are things on the internet, but right now, the tuition master does a better job because of the learning outcomes we have specified. But I think once those are little loosened up, then children will, I think again, because it has to be done outside of school. And I really found that very creative. Um, so there are various ways of doing that.
Um, I, to my understanding, part of the reason why the exams are getting so competitive is because the A level is also used for the university admission.
Yeah.
So that extra fraction of a point on the Z score is worth fighting for because it's the difference between becoming a doctor and not becoming a doctor or something like that. And so even in this other system that's coming or that has been proposed, would that still be the Z score based admission? Right. Because what I sort of an idea that I have is that if those two can be separated, so as long as you pass the A levels, you're eligible for university.
Yeah.
And then for whichever university you want to apply for, you have to face the test of that university. And then that gives the opportunity for each university to have different things. So if that university wants to say, we are going to give you 5 marks if you have done sports, then suddenly there's a value in having done sports because right now, when the exams get near, all the sports go out. So all the so whether you call it in terms of the UNESCO characteristics or the transversal, whatever those things, all of those go out of the window because everybody just wants to get more marks. Is there some way of sort of separating that?
Yeah, some universities for some programs they have this entry for architecture. They have their own, but I think universities are scared to take that decision because it's easier to get through CSCO. And but I think the marketplace is working. What people don't know is in the first year there were 600 no-shows in the science faculties in the system. So people are actually looking at other options. And with the loan scheme, if loans are given with the loan system, you get no interest loans. I think it's a marketplace. It will be the Z score, but kids are wisening up. The foundation is still expensive, but they're taking alternative routes. I think it's changing. The Z score, I think it'll have to be there because in our societies, there is so much plagiarism, so much favoritism. If this is not, none of these matters only for medical faculties. Others are just also ran, they just then apply for biological science or physical science. And I don't know, 600 is a huge number, no shows. And we really need the statistics on retention rate. We just have enrollment and registration, but in true measure of a university is retention and graduation rates. How many graduate after 4 years? Uh, we really need one student management systems in all these universities. Morato has that. I think most of these as data solutions. I think if I were to say anything for higher education, I would ask for student management systems in every university and that data being publicly available. After 1 year, university calendar, what's the retention rate? So, um, open data. But I think the market is working. I think the Z-score system, it'll be hard to get out of that. Within this, I think the still, and also, I think this having this degree at the end of everything will get people diverted to other tracks. I think that will happen.
Yeah, so we've had a segregated school system for a couple of generations now. Is there anyone in the education system who's talking about desegregating schools by either having some classrooms with both language streams, studying in English for some subjects, or some way of, I mean, it is a form of, it's a very old-fashioned notion. It is segregation, call it by whatever, term you want to call it, and it's an outdated, it's a modern world we live in.
Actually, our schools are not segregated. If there's 9,000 schools, only about 100, I think, are segregated. It's us, these old boys and old girls. It's only those schools. Most schools, all the schools, the rest of the schools in the country where normal people go, they are mixed schools.
They are, but neither stream spends adequate time with the other to have any cultural integration.
Even in mixed schools?
Yeah, we're talking in language. Language segregation.
Language segregation. Yeah, I think but language segregation has to happen. If it's Tamil medium, and what's the language we propose there?
Some classes can be in English. The STEM subjects are very easily, it's actually advantageous to have
STEM,
them taught in English.
There was a really good article on, if you see what the IT syllabus, the single is like, I mean, they say, what are the specs for a computer? You take those graphic interface, what is the word they use? Yeah, I mean, it should. No, I think yes, English. I think IT. I think that there's a movement now to teach IT in English. I think it's going to happen. But other subjects, I think it will be great. Yeah, but nobody speaks outside of our, bubble. Nobody speaks English outside. There's a huge gap. We don't have teachers to go into the schools and teach the English. The teachers who teach English, they don't know English. They can't speak English. They have passed exams. So no teaching in English, international school, but I think it's interesting. It's a Muslim community who's going to be our bridge. Go to any government office, they have a Muslim officer who is actually is the interface for anybody who wants, if there's somebody foreign people come, you get that guy to interact. So I was telling actually some of my Muslim colleagues, really Muslims can play a really important bridging role. The Muslim community actually is, the English fluency is, but the rest of the country, it's dead. We don't have we really need to, I don't know how to get that jump started. We just don't have teachers.
Dr.
Yeah.
Dr.
Sorry, I
Gamage,
misunderstood your question.
any examples of especially getting parents incorporated in the system, because the key decision maker on education for a kid is not the kid, so it's a parent or the supporting education bodies. So any examples when you studied, because I feel most of the value inculcation happens at home, and even how good your education system, parents go back to the same system, and also parents has to be knowledgeable to teach kids what to be taught. And even going for like a foreign university, the decision maker, I think pretty much the parent. And also, how about the subs ancillary education mechanisms? Because now the Sunday schools, there are a lot of institutes that kids learn, and sometimes these all controversial things getting into their head of these, other education institutes. It could be the tuition masters as well. So there are also an ecosystem around this. So any examples and any recommendation? And also one final point on your student-centered education system. You mentioned it, it is a positive, but actually student-centered education was there, if I recall right, in 1999. But what happened was, I remember the parents came and said, මේ ළමයි කරන්නේ මේ බෝලාල වලෝ ඉන්නවා විතරයි, ටීචර්ලා දැන් උගන්වන්නේ නැහැ. Because there was like a traffic light system for each subject. You have to do an assignment, and teachers spend a lot of time on pasting those traffic light colors, and parents were not happy about it. So what is your take on those three aspects?
Yeah, I think parents should be involved in student parent teacher conference, but parents, as for policy making, I think you need to keep them out. Parents are very conservative because they're just, as I said, they have this small policy window. They will do whatever they want to get their child into a popular school. Once they're in the popular schools, they're not going to open their mouths and say what's happening in those schools. It's a crappy environment, but 50 children in a class, they will just fight to get the 51st one in. Once they're in, the children are not getting education, and parents are just going to keep them out shut. So, but I think when you do this, that's why I said, to separate these competencies, 21st centuries, into competency, subject competency, and then transversal competency. We need to give parents some notes that they can see the children are, taking, and there are marks. And then there are some other things. They'll be happy if they know only 6 subjects are tested nationally. If these marks are not going to count nationally, I think they will be more responsive. When we tried in Ampara, parents were not happy because they want to see the notes for each subject. Buddhism, who offered what to who, and all that they wanted in the notebook, because they don't know. And when the children ask, they know that the facts are there. But if the facts are not tested, then I think they'll be okay.
English teaching. Actually, I teach at Marjorie D. Alves. I teach at Marjorie D. Alves. I teach speech and drama.
Right.
And we have 3 speech teachers there, and all 3 of us are Muslims.
Yeah.
I think the other factor is that, we train a lot of English speaking students in English, but they always, the other communities, they prefer more, different career paths to teaching, and the Muslims tend to stick to teaching because of the flexible hours and things like that. Yeah. So I suppose that is their conservative, women working less hours thing going on. So is there a plan? I mean, our community would like to volunteer. I mean, we haven't really, I find very few Muslim teachers involved in the government teaching sector. They're mostly in the private sector. Yeah. So, but through our organizations, I mean, we'll be very much happy to volunteer our time.
About English. So what I want to add, because I'm living in this country for last 10 years, and my daughter, she's studying, I think, in the best international school ever. It's LPF Academy in Deval. So because they have like very different concept of learning. But anyway, so what my offer is, everyone knows that Sri Lanka is one of the most difficult countries in the world in terms of they employing foreigners for jobs. So for foreigners to get job here, it's worse in Europe, right? So to get working visa is just hell, especially even if you are wife of the local, still almost impossible. So thing is, you have a clear shortage of English teachers. You have a clear big demand from the foreigners, English-speaking foreigners, who would like to come to country. They can come, they can volunteer, they can work for small salaries as well. It can be students, and it can be like young teachers, young professionals, right? So why government will not open these opportunities? Because you see, for tourism, there is still opportunity. So they getting the foreigners to come because they getting money to come. Why they not getting knowledge to come? Why there will be no opening? Because we recently, me and my husband, we are into trainings and development, so we open our personality development center. So we're doing the skills development programs for adults and for kids. And we had seen that in the schools, because my daughter, she's 16, and she's facing the same issues like others. And I just think if you will get foreigners, more foreigners to come and let them teach, for example, not just the disciplines which can be discussable, let's say religion or whatever, some social studies, ethics. I think that will be much more actually effective.
No, I think, ethics and all, I think there's a syllabus, and I think you don't want outside people coming. But English, yes. Actually, this last comment at the Peace Corps kind of volunteers coming, but there's a change. Even young foreigners, they're looking for, there are no more volunteering.
There are a lot. I'm
There
telling
are
you, there are a lot.
there
Yeah.
are- yeah,
I am
but-
in that area,
yeah.
so really a lot, but there's a very big block from government.
Actually, we had this idea about you have Teach for America and Teach for Sri Lanka and some sort of with English and rallying people and getting volunteers. I remember my son's school had this Shakespeare teacher. She had all the Shakespeare costumes and everything. She goes to every school just for 3 weeks. I'm actually, I would like to think of during holidays, we have a troop, we have about some groups, and they go to every school once a year for 2 weeks and do some intensive English. We need to have something like that and get the, local people who are fluent in English, foreigners,
Yeah.
and there is a need for that. Because when I tried this program at the library, Colombo Municipal Library, what I found is people don't have the time to volunteer. And I ended up just doing it myself for the last almost 1.5 years. So volunteers, you say there is, but when you try to scale it,
Yeah,
to
volunteers
1,000 schools,
and jobs.
we don't have enough to go to remote areas. But no, I think Teach for Sri Lanka kind of program, I think would be really, yes. Foreign, if they are volunteers. Actually, last government, they had a program, I think they got about 1,000, WOOS and all those organizations get, but only a handful. You can't scale those programs. The problem is scaling. Huh? Yeah, sometimes.
I am not talking about
They're
volunteers. I am talking
No.
about different things. I am talking about giving foreigners, young foreigners, opportunity to work. To
Yeah.
basically give the jobs, give the salary which is comparable to local salaries. Yeah, so no need to pay more. But to let them work to get the experience as well, because foreigners, why they come into Asia? They get an experience.
Yeah, actually we have a model in Bangladesh. They have this Women's University Bangladesh. They hire all these unemployed English liberal arts graduates from. So yes, I think our universities could use some liberal arts graduates. It's but
Yeah.
university system is different. I don't think you can make inroads. But the schools, actually, I remember we went to with one of the English teachers in Sri Javadanpur. We went to the ministry to talk about a program where we actually have these animators. These 50,000 that they are proposing to recruit. Actually, we came up with this idea that you get people who are fluent in English and get them as just after they finish exam and in between time. Uh, have a program like Teach for Sri Lanka, and then they can use that for their, I'm not talking about employment, I'm talking volunteers, and use that for their university admissions, and so we can have a program like that. But scaling is again difficult. Somehow there is a huge gap, people who are fluent in English and people who are not, and bridging that gap is very difficult. And volunteers and broadcasting, some sort of mass media approach are the two things I can think of.